tell me this. What did you think of hunters 3, 4, 5 years ago?
I thought they were terrible. So on Facebook, like, my brother is still really close friends. They all got into hunting, and I was the girl that was like, "You're so stupid. Why would you shoot a wolf?" You know, and I was like, "Don't say it's for conservation either," you know, and like I would just go at it because I felt like really strong about it.
You're like, I haven't hunted yet, but you're like, I'm committed. I'm doing this. And my question is why now? What happened?
Right.
Being able to look at hunting from an objective opinion as a grown up, you know, it's changed everything.
All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Bowman podcast. Where are we?
Colville. Uptown.
Colville, Utah. At the R&K Hunting Ranch, right?
Yep.
At Ladies Hunting Camp. And I have had a blast this weekend. And I've got with me, I want to jump right into this. I got 2 guests who are at this camp that have never hunted before. And I thought that was pretty fascinating. I expect like some husband to talk their wife into coming here, you know, and maybe she's never hunted before. But you two are a couple and you came together and you haven't actually hunted, but you're kind of thinking about it.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to talk to you guys and get your story because I think it's fascinating. So with that, please introduce yourself to the Gritty Bowman listeners.
I'm Samantha Reynolds.
Mike Berry.
Both from Salt Lake City. Yep.
Were you born and raised there? Like you grew up there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, surrounding areas.
Yeah. Salt Lake City. I heard it can be ghetto.
It can be. Yeah, it definitely can be, especially.
Zach Griffith told me once it was a little rough. There was a little, ghetto
we got some gangs. Yeah, we got some like hardcore gangs. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's there's different stereotypes I think that come with Salt Lake City.
Yeah, it's a cool place.
Usually,
though.
it's not gangs. So
No,
it was kind of like, you grew up in a little hood, huh?
so that was a true statement.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never heard that before. Never.
He's like, I've been in far worse hoods than that. Let me
Yeah.
tell you.
I thought it was just a
That was child's
real
play.
bad joke.
So, tell me a little bit about your history because you didn't grow up, Mike, with anybody that hunted.
No, nobody.
And Samantha, you're the same.
Yeah, I think my brother got into it in his like early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the closest though, so it's still pretty distant from me, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, none of my family has ever hunted. Not even into guns, not into any of it. I mean, outdoors, sure,
Right.
but nothing.
So we were talking yesterday, and I was kind of surprised, to learn more about your story. And what I was really curious about is how do you go from someone who's never hunted and really not, and you tell me this, what did you think of hunters 3, 4, 5 years ago?
I thought they were terrible. And I would even so I went to school.
Don't hold back.
I went to school in a smaller town. And so on Facebook, my brother is still really close friends with everybody that we went to high school with. And, they all got into hunting, and I was the girl that was like, "You're so stupid. Why would you shoot a wolf?" And I was like, "Don't say it's for conservation either," and I would just go at it because I felt really strong about it. And granted, this was even 3 years ago, so pretty recent. And, but I've always loved the outdoors. I've always loved animals, more than I love people. And,
Yeah.
I'm just a really emotionally sensitive person. And so that it just got to me, and I didn't like it. And I wasn't afraid to tell people that I didn't like it. But then when we moved to North Dakota about 3.5 years ago, and I had a lot of time on my hands because there's just, there's not a lot to do out there, especially in the outdoors. There's a lot of fishing, there's not a lot of hiking, and there's not a lot to do. and I'll be the first to say, like, Mike did give me the little push to, like, have a little bit more of an open mind about it. But we just started really thinking about why we were against it and the real reasons why I thought it was so terrible. And I just realized they were a little bit silly because I've always eaten meat.
Yeah.
And we all know that, like, factory farms are terrible, and that's probably what most of us were brought up on, you know, that type of circumstances. And so it's just, I don't know. I was kind of trying to think about why I was being a hypocrite and why I thought these people were so terrible for going out and hunting their own meat. But that goes back to the type of hunters that I knew, you know? And so there were people going out to, like, shoot prairie dogs for no reason and just leave them dead there and, like, want to get the biggest and best. And I just felt like, oh, you think you're so awesome because you can stop a beating heart. Like, you're a freaking idiot, you know? And I don't know. I don't know where the shift came from other than, like, Mike pushing me a little bit. But I've always maintained that if I were emotionally able to do it, I would have my own farm. I would have my own animals. I would raise them. I would kill them and eat them. But the emotional side of me is like, that's not even possible. So it's always been this, like, internal conflict for me.
Well, I think it's cool that there is this awareness that you have about where you're like, I eat meat, but when this guy goes out and kills something and eats it, why do I feel this anger toward that person? So you're doing this introspection, you're thinking about it. But I can relate to you in the sense that there are hunters I see go out and do things that I struggle with.
Yeah.
Because it really comes down to why, like the motive. Tell me, like, if a guy goes out and does it or a gal, because he wants to fill the freezer and get organic, healthy meat, how do you feel about it?
I totally support it. And even when Michael first started talking about, like, him wanting to hunt, I was like, oh, I don't feel good about that. And then I started to really think about it and why don't I feel good about it? And it was just purely for emotional reasons and, like, me feeling sadness for these animals and their life getting taken from them. But ultimately, I like it and I support Mike in it. I'm still not even sure if I want to hunt yet, but I've got an extremely open mind about it, and I probably will get there one day. I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to participate in skinning the animal yesterday, and for me, that's just fine. Where I'm at is just fine.
Yeah.
Because I'm totally new to even having an open mind about this.
That's cool.
Yeah. But I'm not there yet. And Mike asked me before we came, he said, are you nervous? Because, like, all of these girls are going to be, like, avid hunters. They're going to be able to, like, shoot guns better than you and, like, archery and just all of it. And I was like, kind of nervous. But, like, why would I be embarrassed of wanting to learn and wanting to know more and wanting to see it firsthand? Like, I just don't see why you would feel ashamed of that, you know?
Right.
And so for me, I wasn't embarrassing to sit back and not participate in that because I'm just not ready. I probably would have been bawling, you know? Even though it was like roadkill, I probably would have been bawling.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned this emotional response. Right?
Yeah.
There's an emotional feeling that you have, a strong one, when you see an animal being killed and even though you eat it and you're going to eat it, it's still hard to see that. And I think sometimes a guy that's grown up shooting stuff and eating it his whole life, it's hard for them to relate to you.
Yeah.
Like, why is there so much emotion here? It's just part of this circle of life. But I think when you haven't taken a life before and you haven't seen, like, field to table, like, even if you're on a farm and you go out and you're like, that's like we have done, that's so-and-so chicken, and they all have names. And then we go out and we kill them all. And the kids are like, you killed, Rooster, how could you kill, that he's our buddy. But that right there has sort of We do it with as much, compassion as we can, but we still do it. And I think my kids then, they love animals and they love wildlife and stuff, but there's also a connection they have to the food that they eat, and that it's kind of a decision you make. If you decide you're not going to eat meat, it comes with certain costs as well. Yeah. In terms of agriculture and farming and impact to an environment. And it's kind of like there's not much we can do actually in this world in terms of trying to not impact the environment. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's like if I'm going to impact the environment and I'm going to impact this planet, I want to do it in a more natural way than I would otherwise. And so going out and hunting feels more natural. That elk grew up in a normal state. I went out and tried to leave as little footprint as I could in the wilderness. I killed it. I backpacked it out. There was no car. There were no cars, no four-wheelers, and I bring it home. I butcher it and I put it in the freezer, and then we eat that. We grow some of our own vegetables, and we buy a lot of organic vegetables at the store from local farmers markets. And I feel like that's my way of sort of, we have a small, modest home. We try not to, just buy everything on the planet and have the biggest house and the most. It's like I try to live a life that's more, I feel, less impactful. And hunting is like one of those ways I feel like that can be done. And when I started thinking, I have a lot of vegetarian friends or vegan, and when they start talking about, soybeans and crops and like all the stuff you got to do to get enough protein from a plant base, it's like that's wholly unnatural to me. You need so much like plant matter that takes up so much water and resources and fertilizer and so on. It just becomes something that I'm like, wow.
A vegan is terrible for the environment. But I think for me, like growing up, I was just really ignorant to it all, and I was really naive, and I just wasn't really in touch with like where my food was coming from, because it wasn't instilled in me as a child like it is your kids. And I think that that's super awesome. But I just never really like thought about where it was coming from, what type of quality of life these animals had. And I think that that's one of the biggest reasons for my shift in the way of thinking. And we were talking about it on the way home from somewhere. How could you not think that that's ethical to let this animal like live its life, be wild and free, live their life to the fullest? And why would you think that it's wrong to take an animal that has got that opportunity versus an animal that has only known like
cage?
Yeah. Why would you think that that's wrong versus eating a hamburger from McDonald's? I think that that's just like one of the biggest things that has touched me, is that animal like truly getting to just be wild and be itself and be free, I
think my issue with the argument against eating a plant-based diet, vegans, vegetarians, and hunting is it goes back to things that we've talked about earlier, is your motive, your intent, and for me, if your motive for being vegan is because you have a deep emotional attachment or a care for the natural life, the wildlife, then you got to allow yourself to say, well, what's more important to me, or is that more important to me than the ecosystem or the environment? Because they're both going to impact wildlife, this planet, and
on a big scale. It's not just.
Well, I mean, we got 7.5-8 billion people on this planet, 300 something million just in the U.S., and it's a lot of soybeans. If we were all to choose to be that way, there's going to be an impact regardless of what you choose to eat, and I think it's inconsiderate, it's hypocritical to profess a large care for
wildlife,
and not
ignore that,
not the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
ignore the impact.
Which really, I mean, that's a larger scale.
I sometimes when I have those discussions with friends of mine that really want to see me be a vegetarian, and we have those discussions, often what comes from that though is it's no longer a rational conversation. It's switched to the emotional, and it's not that they'll disagree with the impact. At some point they start to agree, but it's just they can't imagine taking the life of the animal. And in many ways that's admirable, right? Like
I've felt that way for 95% of my life. You know, it's separating your emotional self with your rational self. It's a difficult task. I mean, it's not necessarily just ego, but I mean, emotion is a powerful thing. And I have like a pretty constant struggle with not basing what I do in this life off of pure emotion. I mean, it's to a fault at times. Like, I'll get cold. You know?
If I were to base everything off my emotions, I would be I'd be locked away. Like, people think I was insane. We were at this barbecue the other day on the 4th, though, and it's my friend's boyfriend. It's the first time I had ever met him, and he was like real vegan. And I can be friends with anybody. I can be friends with all walks of life. But if you're ignorant and you're rude and you're offensive, I'm done with you. Like, I don't want anything to do with you. And
that surprises me.
Yeah, and she's like, well, just bring some meat. Like, we don't eat meat, but just bring some meat. So I was like, okay, whatever. Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to bring some brats, you know? And so we brought him, and he's walking me out to the barbecuer, and he could have just been like, we're doing meat on this side, we're doing vegetables on this side. That's it. But he goes, the way that I think about it is, I'm going to put the vegetables on the right side and the meat on the left side. And a good way to remember that is, like, the vegetables are on the right side because that's, like, the right choice. And I was just immediately done. I was like, all right. And I let all the, like, the brats just drip all over his grill. And I didn't even brush it off. Like, the respect for him was just gone in a sense. And so I was done with him. I was like, that's so offensive, and that's so rude, and that's so unnecessary.
Well, I think being able to have a conversation, you know, and respecting another person's viewpoint is really critical. And you're not going to sway anybody with bullying or offensive behavior or anything like that. There has to be some respect, and that really will impact someone's you know, if he really wants you to understand or come at it from his perspective, he's got to respect your own at first.
Yeah.
And then it becomes an open discussion. Well, one thing I was saying this the other day, there's certain individuals I like to follow because they're always open to new information. One of the guys that I really like, and you guys should check it out. I want to send you a link to a couple of Shane Mahoney's podcasts on conservation matters. And but he's like, look, man, if hunting is working, the North American model of conservation is working, which we've demonstrated. Like, there's more turkey, deer, buffalo, elk than there has been in, maybe not buffalo, but there has been, like, of all these other animals that have come back, and even buffaloes come back from on the verge of extinction. You know, all these critters come back under this model of hunting. And he's like, if that's working, then that's what we should apply in Africa, and we should apply here, and we should apply in Europe, and we should apply in all these different places, because we've demonstrated that by having the system we have in place, that we're able to actually bring animals back to these massive levels of and habitat, back to healthier levels, cleaner water. But he's like, but if for some reason next week I figured out with new information that it was a bad idea for the animals, and this is not helping restore or bring back animal populations, or it's not the best way to coexist with animals and humans on this planet, then I would be like, we need to get rid of it. And this is someone who's really dedicated to hunting. But being able to change your mind when you get new information and to be adaptable and plastic and dynamic, I think is critical. So for me, I feel like hunting is the right thing. I feel like being outdoors in nature and all that stuff is the right thing. And I truly believe right now that is, it feels right. And it's something I want to champion. But if somewhere along the lines I figured something else out, new information came, I'm not married to that thing being the perfect answer, right? I'm always open to some new set of information that might be better or different, that might change my thinking.
That's kind of what you and I were talking about yesterday, and what you just said, the willingness to change your mind is, for me, probably one of the most profound but simple ideas that seems like it's very rarely practiced.
Yeah.
And it's hard to change your mind.
It's something that I learned in my adult life. I was just never that way as a teenager. I was just always so set. And it's only been probably in the past 5 years that I've been open to like changing my mind and opinions. And again, it was just complete ignorance,
Kind of going back to what you're saying, it was Shane Mahoney. That's who you're just referencing.
Yep.
That kind of sparks an issue that it's kind of one of the last issues I have with hunting culture, not hunting itself, because at this point I'm completely sold on hunting as being the answer for me.
Right, for us.
And honestly, as of right now, I think it's just the right thing. But hunting culture, now that's a separate idea, and that's, like she was saying, that's something that can push people away from something that might be the right thing, just the people behind. I was thinking about it this morning. The idea behind conservation and hunting, the two being married together, is something I struggle with whenever I am listening to somebody, even people that I've come to highly respect in the hunting world.
Mm-hmm.
It lets me down when I hear,
that's the reason.
well, even beyond that, just we are the number one conservationists.
Right.
Because for me, it's a tool for conservation, but it's also something that you just like to do, and to not just be real about it, as in having to try to justify or make a good intellectual reasons or something that seems very enlightened, like conservation as being the reason why you hunt, is a weak thing for me, because
it's like conservation is a byproduct.
That's exactly what it is, and it's a great byproduct. It's absolutely it's an incredible thing, and honestly, I don't think hunting is a bad thing either. They're both great things, but I wonder sometimes if the money that came from tag allocation, hunting,
gun sales,
the taxes, and all
ammunition,
that, if the money that came from that didn't go to conservation, and that was purely fulfilled through general tax dollars, and it was still working that way, how many hunters would stop hunting because what they're doing isn't taking part
Not
in
many.
that?
Like none.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So I can be completely enamored with somebody that I feel like is in it for the right reasons. They're a respectable person and all of that, and then it's like we are the ones that are completing this great tool of conservation, and it's hard for me. That's difficult for me. But you are. It's just that's not your motive.
Only
maybe.
reason.
Yeah,
and I think for every hunter, it's different, right? I've said this before. In all honesty, 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't even really know that my dollars went to conservation at all. I hunted most of my life with family and friends and buddies and all that. I didn't quite make those full connections or really get into that. And I still, volunteered for certain groups and did things around critters and elk and deer. And I heard Stephen Ranella at a conference once speak, and he said, as a young man, he's the same. He just took and took and took from hunting. He took critters. He took the experiences. He was in the wild and public lands and all this stuff. He was just like a taker. And then he said, then all of a sudden he kind of hit this older age, and he was like, felt very indebted and like he needed to give back. And he got aware of certain things, and he got involved, and he started to write things and do things that made a difference and gave back for like, he's like, I felt like all I did was consume, and then it reached an awareness and felt some gratitude and flipped it around and started giving back. And I think there's that progression for a lot of people, that in the beginning, why they do something may not be, you hear some individuals like Shane, who's like, I hunted a lot. I just don't want to kill anything anymore. I get game meat from different people and do some fishing, but and you hear different, like even Ranella will talk about how there's certain things he just doesn't want to pull the trigger every time he goes out.
Yeah, I think I heard him talking about bears once. Actually, two separate points, that being one of them. I think it was an episode of Meat Eater, where he had mentioned that if he glasses up a bear, whether he has a tag in his pocket for one or not, like, it's the only thing that he just can't stop looking at, watching.
Right. Can't decide if he wants to shoot it or just watch it.
Yeah, and I mean that, and then I think he had mentioned once also that there seems to be a progression in some hunters who at first were okay with hunting bear, that later just kind of change their mind about it. It becomes something that they're not.
Yeah.
As
we talked about that a little bit earlier, like there's some animals I think that people later, like we talked about elephants, right? And how intelligent they are and how, what a special animal they are. And it's like, I really don't have an interest in killing an elephant or a whale. Or a dolphin. There's like a level of intelligence that they possess where I'm kind of like, it's harder for me to do than if you kill a chicken. And we kind of talked about this hierarchy of animals, right? And so there's an emotional reason. There's something behind some of that.
For sure. I think for me, if and when I do end up hunting, it won't be that type of hunting. Yeah. It won't be going out and shooting an elephant, It's just not that for me, but I don't know. I think the thing that I look forward to the most is just like how connected with nature and yourself and what you're doing and what you're putting in your body. Or what you will be putting in your body. Yeah,
healthy protein.
And I think just like the emotional aspect and like even feeling connected to that animal that you just took. I think for me, those are the most profound reasons why I'm interested in it now. Because I love nature. But that takes it to a whole different level in my opinion. And I just, I don't know what I'll feel like, but I know I'll cry. I know I'll feel sad. I know I'll feel happy. I know I'll feel adrenaline, but it's just something I've never experienced before. So it is a little bit exciting to think about, but I don't think that I would ever lose that,
Yeah. Well, I like what you're saying, Mike, when you say, you just want integrity in it. Like when someone says, I hunt and this is why, you want the real reason why. And it might be that conservation is part of that, but don't hang your hat on that only. Don't act like that's the only reason. There's a selfish want for meat that's organic and healthy. There's a desire to possess and have an animal that you've been chasing for a long time. If you're looking at some whitetail you've tracked for 5 years, right? There's more to it than that. But fine. Articulating that's tough. And especially it seems like so many hunters are always trying to argue their case And so they jump right to conservation.
What they think people want to hear and the most logical
it's a good
reason for some people. Yeah, and
if
it
that
is.
was the reason.
Yeah.
And like just a moment before, if you like to hunt, that's fine. That's a good enough reason. If it fulfills you, and your intentions are good, that's a good enough reason for me.
But as you guys being not from hunting, right? Tell me what is it? What are the reasons that a guy hunts or a gal hunts that bothered you?
Just shooting to kill, just going out there to kill and just being extremely unethical about it, or letting an animal suffer, or in my mind, I was just like, you guys are all killers. Like, that's, if you just want to go kill, then you're a piece of garbage. But really, I think just what I had seen of it was just people doing it in a ridiculous manner and being extremely wasteful about it and disrespectful. And I even get that way with fish. I'll even cry over watching someone mishandle a fish. Like, I do not like it. And we saw all the time in North Dakota, people just like taking a freaking sturgeon and flipping it up in the air and letting it slap on its face. And I just lose it. Like, I don't like that. And so for me, it's really unfair that I did this, but like I said, I put you guys all in one category, and that's not right, because everybody's different in anything, in any hobby or any walk of life. Everybody's going to be different, and people are going to do it the right way, and people are going to do it the wrong way. And what I had seen was only the wrong way, and it's extremely upsetting to see someone mistreat nature and an animal and the privileges that they have to go out and be a part of all of that. So I think the biggest thing is just disrespect for me, and that's all I knew.
I think for me, it's not necessarily that I put much stock or care about people hunting or not, because it was just nothing that I was around. I mean, it's not something that I had other interests. I was not brought up in it. None of my friends that, even though where we lived, it's not big. Yeah. So it's not necessarily something that I thought much about. But when I did, it was typically a negative feeling towards it, and that's just because of the same thing. I hadn't seen the good.
Well, the friends that we keep, I don't think either of us even have one friend besides you now that hunts, so this is just something that we've kind of gone off on, and I'm sure a lot of our friends will have some opinions on it. My best friend she doesn't like it, she's like, why do you want to own a gun? And it's just, she doesn't understand, and that's fine too, but we don't know anybody, so we're just kind of winging it and kind of learning what we want to learn, and going from there.
I kind of an extension off of that is when it's not something that I invest any emotional value to, and then what you are exposed to is poor excuses, the disrespect, but when you are curious, or when you allow yourself to listen or read in on something that is a reason why somebody does something that you don't like, hunting, if it's a poor excuse, it's just like, well, it's just, I'm done.
I don't want to hear it. Yeah,
I'm not gonna.
Who wanted to ban lion hunting after the Cecil event? The issue there is, once they banned it, or once they said you can't ship lions back to the United States, and you couldn't do a lot with them, then all the hunters didn't go hunt them. And they also didn't want the backlash from it. And there was a huge dollar vacuum, because people were spending between $30,000 and $50,000, sometimes $100,000 for a lion hunt. If you have 5 lions, that's $500,000 that your area gets for those lions. And then people come in and they also hunt the Gemsbach and the gazelle and all that kind of stuff. Well, as soon as you take out the value of a lion, now it's straight up liability. It's now just eating the other critters that you're growing and stuff like that. It's worth it to them to keep a pride of lions in the place when you get $100,000 for a lion. It's like, okay, I can deal with it eating this $15,000, ram.
Right.
But when you now say, yep, the lion is worth nothing, those poor people are not incentivized to take care of it. Right. So then what do you replace those dollars with? And it's like, well, we'd love to have like tourism, or we'd like to have people just because they care about lions put money in. Nobody who cares about lion is spending $100,000 on it. It's just, they're not. And
nobody. Hunters or non-hunters.
Hunters or non-hunters. And so it becomes this thing where it's like, unfortunately, the drive for a human being to hunt an animal like a lion and have that experience and to possess it and have it in their home is so high that someone is willing to give $100,000. But if you just ask them to do it for the sake of a lion, it will never happen.
It's just this...
the rare few. And that's a sad truth. And so when you sit here and you start talking about the reason that what you do helps conservation, it's not your driving motive. It's the drive to possess and to have this thing. And the conservation is a byproduct. And we're willing, as most hunters are, we're totally willing. We're willing. We feel really good about the byproduct.
Yeah,
but we grab onto that as it's the main motive, and it's not.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's interesting, though. So I think hunters in general, like with Connie, I'm like, yeah, I understand that
it helps.
It helps, and so on, and I'm okay with that model, because in a way it's like an exaggerated model of what we have in the United States, where you spend $700 on an Idaho elk tag as a non-resident, right? And you got hundreds and hundreds of guys who do that. And granted, they're there to get meat, but a lot of times those states are managing them for higher age class animals, because they know that the big dollars come from the guys that want to spend the money for a chance to shoot an older, bigger animal. It's not about the meat only anymore.
Yeah, and I think that's great. Like, if you want to go and hunt a rhinoceros in Africa, go ahead and do it. Like, I do think that it's extremely beneficial to the community and whatever area it's in. But for me, like, PETA, what is that tag called out on Antelope Island where they get the one tag to shoot the
governor's tag?
Yeah, and it goes for like $400,000. I think that's what it went for last year, or something, like some outrageous number like that. And for me, like, if PETA feels so passionately about them, something like that, they should go and contribute the $400,000 and then burn it in front of everybody. That's what I would do if I had that strong conviction, so
it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
But on the same token, that exact topic, the Antelope Island governor's tag, I believe it's the governor's tag, or it was just an auction tag.
Yeah,
one of the two. I first heard about it on a podcast. I didn't even know it's half an hour from my house, Antelope Island.
Yeah.
I didn't know they did that. I didn't know anything about, but it was a podcast listening to a couple of years ago, and that was the argument. It was like, well, we spend $100,000 or more on this tag, and I think on those tags, you can correct me. I probably will need to.
We don't know enough,
but
yeah.
I think something like high 90s in the percentages of those tags go directly to the cause of that, like
that species,
right? Exactly.
Like if they sell like a ram for like $100,000 or something, 200 or 500,000, when they do that, Yeah, usually, often the funds for that 100% go to that species,
Right.
like betterment.
Sure. And so when I was listening to that, that's an incredible thing. That's admirable, and and I think I forget even who it was in that podcast, but it was like, we as hunters, we're the ones giving that money to that species, to that conservation, and there's nobody like PETA
Not the
or
activists
whoever that are doing it. They refuse to do it, and so when we've been asked, like, why don't, if you care so much about it, why don't you just donate that money and not hunt not fill that tag,
Right.
And to me that's a good question. I mean, it probably is asked not earnestly. It's probably right, but it's a good question, and I haven't heard a good answer. And the answer that was given to that hypothetical was, well, why don't you do it? Why aren't you doing it? And that's childish to me.
Yeah,
And it's
Well, I think too, it's just kind of this fact of life we talked about earlier, that there's people that are willing to spend upwards of $1 million and more to hunt a certain animal and to bring it home, possess it, have it in their home, whether it's taxidermy or whatever, just to have the experience, who are not willing to take that same money and just give it away for the sake of that animal. And that's just the fact. That's why the North American model of conservation is working, because people are willing to pay to hunt, but not willing to pay to support. And that's where, like, these other organizations like PETA and so forth, they just don't generate the same revenue stream for wildlife, because people aren't willing to spend that kind of money just out of the goodness of their heart.
If they don't get something
out of it. And so it's an interesting thing, because you're talking about people's motives and reasons for why they do something, and I try really hard not to judge the way someone else spends their money. They earned it. They did whatever they did to acquire it. Maybe they're very talented, or maybe they were very lucky, or maybe they just worked their butt off, whatever the reason is. And if they want to spend it and buy a yacht, or if they want to spend it and hunt a rhino, for my part, what I care about is that when it comes to hunting an animal, that it's for the betterment of that species in the end. That it helps in a conservation minded way. But it is interesting, because that may not be the primary motive for someone's choice to buy a governor tag.
I think a lot of people say that's why.
Yeah. Well, I think there probably are a few people who feel that definitely are like, look, I'm doing this. I would never spend $500,000 on this critter, this tag for this critter. I'd spend 50. But you know what? I'm going to spend 500 because it helps conservation, and I'd like to go sheep hunting anyway.
Yep.
Sure.
And so I think there's definitely, I don't want to take away from people. They're like say that their motives are shallow or whatever, when there could be some very altruistic reasons for why they do it. But and I've seen some where they buy the tag and they end up giving it to, they buy it and then they're like, they have some friend of theirs that has never hunted before go and hunt the sheep. So they give that experience away to someone else. They buy it, but they give it to someone else. It wasn't for themselves. It was to get someone else an experience. And so I think there's a lot of motivations out there, and they vary. And I look at it as a spectrum. There's some people who really, really, really do work their butt off in conservation. They do it for very pure reasons. And then there's a lot of us who just do it indirectly by accident because we love to hunt.
And that's fine, Just do it in like a respectful, ethical, and way, and it's just fine. If you're doing it the right way, then I have no issue why you're doing it. That's the thing is, if you're just going to own up to what you're doing, that's fine by me. That's
we like different things. People
Yeah.
like different things. Some people like to hunt because
makes
they
people so
enjoy
great,
it. Some
you
people
know?
like interpretive dance. Some people like
somebody like stripper poles like we had out here at ladies camp.
you know, and whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's okay to be different. That's the other
Tell
thing.
me this, like so I haven't got your story yet. You told me the other day, you're like, I haven't hunted yet, but you're like, I am going to. I'm committed. I'm doing this. There's no question in your mind that this is the path you're going down. And you're going to hunt. You've got yourself a bow, and you're out there shooting, and you got a Kafaru, which I think is awesome, Kafaru sawtooth, and you guys are like getting some gear to really get out and do this, and you've made that choice. You've turned the corner, and you're going to hunt. Now, Samantha might not. She might. It might take some time.
Yeah.
But you're in. And my question is why? Why now? What happened?
Well, I don't know if I have the answer for that yet. I mean, it's probably been less than a year since I've made that decision. Maybe longer I've been,
changing your mind a little bit.
But it's probably less than a year since I've made the decision inside myself that that's what I'm doing. And so I don't have enough experience. I haven't collected enough knowledge to fully articulate a reason of what.
Well,
what it all
I
is.
think both of us are pretty mindful as adults. Like I said, when I was younger, I wasn't, but I think we're pretty mindful about, like, we don't litter. We don't leave anything behind when we can't. Like, I'll pick up people's trash I'll take trash bags like everywhere I go. Mm-hmm. And I think we're just pretty mindful of things like that. And so we've got a family. Like, we have 2 kids, and we want to raise them right, and we want to raise them to be good people. And I just think for us, it makes the most sense. And I think for the most part, what we'll use hunting for is to feed us and our family. And for us, it just seems like the right thing, you know? Like I said, I would love to have a farm and just eat my animals and eat my garden. But it just seems right. It just seems like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to explain.
But I think a big part of it is just being a little bit older and more capable to discerning different ideas, not being stuck in something that maybe you've been like indoctrinated with as a child, or
Right.
being able to look at hunting from an objective opinion as a grown up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's been really interesting because it's changed everything. I mean, like she has said, we've both always been enamored with being in the natural world. I mean, as a child, my dad was. I mean, he's always been a hiker, backpacker, fishing. Always
In tune with nature.
Right,
and-
exactly. And so I remember being a kid and just having to follow him everywhere in the hills, in the desert. And so it's always been something that's been a part of me, and I've always enjoyed it thoroughly. I mean, years ago, I got into backpacking just because the solitude of the mountains it's a fulfilling thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't feel like that big of a change. It was just the change of mindset and what my diet was.
Right.
That's it. I mean, just owning up to real life.
Yeah, and I think you need to take responsibility for the food that you're eating too. You know, I don't think that you should just mindlessly eat whatever's in front of you. Like, I think that you should put in thought into it and heart into it, and I think that that's mostly my driving force for wanting to hunt, or even considering to hunt, I should say. I don't know. In my heart, I feel like that's just the right way. And if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right, you know? And that was a big reason for me coming to this campus, because I want to be proficient with a bow, and I want to be I want to feel extremely comfortable with guns, and I'm not, and it's helped a lot, but I would never go out and hunt if I didn't feel like I was ready in those areas.
Yeah.
So this has been great.
We were talking earlier about something that came up into my mind. And my mom there's emotion. There's there's some emotion tied to this. And you were talking about separating your emotions from logic, sometimes to the point where you're too far on the logic side, right? And I grew up with, big family, and my mom is tough and always was this tough woman, but very, very emotional. Like, she adores her children, and she's our biggest fan. And but there were times where she would do what she called tough love, where she didn't want to discipline us or take privileges away or do things. It broke her heart to do it. But she knew that was what was good for us from a logical standpoint. Like, and she felt like, and I do this to my daughter all the time. I say, Caitlin, I love you too much to let you sleep in all morning long, eat Cheetos, and not go on a hike with me.
Yep.
No, it's not good for you. And so I'm going to be the guy that makes you do it even though you don't want to.
Yep.
And I feel like when it comes down to hunting, there's an emotional thing where it's like, I don't want to kill this deer. But if I don't kill this deer and do it this way, in the end, I'm actually doing more harm in many ways to animals in general, if I'm supporting factory farming. And sometimes farmers tune into this podcast and they're a little hurt because of the conversations we have here, because there's a lot of really good farmers out there. When I say farming, I'm talking about mass factory farming, like the farming where they've done horrible things to the animals. They inject them with things that they shouldn't, antibiotics and hormones, and
force feed them.
They force feed them, and they're on feedlots, and that's what I'm talking about.
This is real sad.
But my point is that in many ways, you're doing something. It's like the lesser of two evils. Mm-hmm. You're killing an animal to eat it because life eats life, and it doesn't matter if it's a plant. An elk eating a plant. It's life eating life, and that's the circle. That's the circle we're in. So it's basically participating in the life eats life cycle in the least impactful way that you can. It's still, for many people, a difficult thing because they have this emotion where they care deeply about that animal, and so to kill it is tough. But the alternative is, in many ways, for me, weaker.
Don't you think that you gain so much respect from, like, killing and eating your own animal? Like, it's just something to be very prideful about, and I don't know. I think for me, if I do kill an animal, like, I think I'll be extremely proud of what I did and feel extremely proud to feed it to my family. And I think that there's a higher level of respect in that than going to get, something from the market. I think there's just so much more to hunting than
when I killed my first elk, and that was a turning point for me. And we had killed some deer and different critters and eaten them, but I shot a bull elk and in the mountains, and it was a big animal. I mean, and it just sort of was this, whoa, I just killed this big animal, and it was alive one moment and then it was dead the next. And I remember I hadn't personally shot a lot of animals. Like, there was a couple of deer up to that point, and so here I shot this elk, and it's gone, it's dead. And it really weighed on me for the first time that I just killed something. And I don't know why, but because it was bigger, it just seemed more monumental, right? Whether that's appropriate or not, I just felt like this heaviness to it. And I remember, though, skinning it, gutting it, just quartering it, bringing the meat home, filling it in my freezer, and like touching that meat, cutting it up, preserving it, caring for it through the wilderness, getting it home,
Just feeling
feeling it, getting it into the freezer, grinding some of it into burger, and processing it from the mountains to my freezer, and then eating it for the year. It completely changed the way I saw the world. And I think that it's cool that you can imagine it being something special, even though you haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
Because I grew up with it, and yet until I did it with my own elk by myself, it hadn't really hit me yet.
Yeah.
I think there are probably a lot of people that maybe it's never touched them in that way. They're born into it. It's something they've done all their life, but it's they've never had that type of feeling from it, because it is what it is.
It's their way of life.
It's always been that way. And that's interesting to me. And so is like your experience, and I imagine my experience will be probably something similar to that, where walk up to this animal that I just taken its life, and it'll probably be extremely emotional and powerful. But I think the gratitude is huge.
Yeah.
It's weird to talk about it like I've done it before, because I have no idea. I mean, but I've already convinced myself that of what it is, as if I have already.
But we know ourselves as people. I don't think it's like totally off key to think about how we would feel about it. We know ourselves and how we are emotionally and how we feel about a lot of things. And so I don't think I already know, I think you'll cry the first time. I do. And that's great, and I think, and that's why I love you.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's weird to say that you have more respect for an animal that you just killed, that you're going to have more respect for this animal that you just took its life. And that's seems a little bit contradicting to me. But
that said, though, although Leopold and you have guys like Theodore Roosevelt, and I just finished reading a book called Boone, all about Daniel Boone. And I've read a couple about Daniel Boone and other frontiersmen. And they killed a lot of animals. And you read about the Native American, the Lakota and the Shawnee and the Pawnee and these people that there was some interaction early on the Iroquois. And I'm listening to these stories, and it seemed like Native Americans truly had, in many ways, their deities and their spiritualness they derived from animals. And they were a huge part. There was a lot of respect and love for the animals, even though they ate them and consumed them on a continual basis, right? There was a sense of gratitude for that consumption. And then I think a lot of individuals like woodsmen and frontiersmen and mountain men felt, like Daniel Boone, definitely felt a love of nature and wild things in the natural world. And I think that's totally natural to partake of it and then actually feel an increased level of love for it. Yep. It's like there's a gratitude that comes from it. And then there are people who are definitely doing it or participating in it just for gain. And that's a different type of person, and there isn't the same feeling about it.
Well, to kind of get away from the deep aspect of it,
elk sure taste good.
I'm not gonna lie, I love elk.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome.
It's and
me too.
And I
love meat.
I'm already in love with the idea of hunting as something that's just fun to do.
Yeah.
So, it's not just.
Oh, for sure.
I'm not gonna pretend like, as this very enlightened individual. Like this is my purpose for hunting. It is the reason why I've decided to hunt is basically the food, but it's
To an
it's
extent.
fun to be out there.
But now you're,
you know,
Shane Mahoney talks about how, hunting is man's oldest try at life. Like, it's been around since human beings have been around. Like, that's how we became the dominant species, is being the dominant predator. And as harsh as that sounds to some people, it's like, that's why we invented spears and arrows and now guns. Like
kill.
It's to kill.
And I think a larger sign of that is like catch and release fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You do it because it's fun.
Right.
You know, and
We mostly catch and release.
yeah,
which
that's kind of changed a little bit recently. At least
Tiny
the
bit, but-
the mindset of it, but
Yeah.
it's just fun to do. So
It is, and it's nice to have like something together. I mean, I definitely want him to go do it by himself, and I'll do my own thing, hiking or whatever it may be. But it's brought us closer together in some ways, and really helped our relationship.
well, it was sometime after I had made this decision. I remember I was at work. I was probably listening to some podcast about. It was probably it was a. I think I was listening to. I think it was probably yours.
Yeah.
I think you may have been talking about something Randy Newberg had said once, but it's just been on my mind. Like it has a lot, but I remember telling her like I am already infatuated with like every aspect to hunting. Because I'm already in love with backpacking, being out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, the solitude, just that's already there. It's already instilled in me. And then also stalking an animal,
Dude.
just like that's incredible.
Like Shane Mahoney is talking about, he's like, everything means more. The scent on the air means more. The way the wind's blowing means more. Whether there's going to be a storm coming or not. The way your feet touch the ground means more. Like, I see things when I'm hunting that I don't see when I'm just backpacking. There's like a predator thing that you
It's like
turn
this
on.
primal thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's this something ingrained in our DNA that when you do it and you're successful and stuff, or even if you're not, you're tempting, that turns something on inside you that is just, and it's like, man, the most stress reducing thing I do is like chase up a mountain, some herd of critters, and try to sneak in on them, belly crawl. I haven't eaten all day. I'm dehydrated. And yet I feel more fulfilled and alive, even though I'm like ragged tired, than when I do just about anything else. And I've seen men who never cry or show any emotion whatsoever, that, like Aaron, all he does is laugh or talk crap, and then he shoots a critter with his recurve, and he's about ready to cry. And you see that excitement in someone that doesn't show emotion. You hear wives that are like, he didn't cry when our kid was born, but he cried when he shot that whatever. Like, and there's something there.
Well, something that has changed in my mind that I never considered about it was the amount of difficulty involved in hunting. I mean, some hunting obviously is harder than others, and especially the way that you go about it, like backpack hunting, this do-it-yourself aspect. But I never considered the difficulty and the time
Pushing
and
yourself to that
the
limit.
emotions that are invested in it. It's like, it's not just pull up to a spot, shoot an animal, throw it in the back of your truck.
Yeah, I feel like you have to expect to be like the most miserable you've been in your life, and I think that's like super awesome. You can look back on it a week later and be like, man, that was one of the best experiences of my life, and I was completely miserable.
Well, I'll tell you what, the meat means more to you.
Yep.
Like, when if we bring home and we cook a burger or something and my kids don't eat it all, like, I'm like, that is cherished gold. Like
I spent 2 weeks
hiking that off the mountain, and that was like a monumental achievement. And you're not going to eat it because it.
Okay, I'll eat it. Yeah.
And they you know.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that's the thing is that I never considered, and I have to give credit to those who work their ass off to achieve what I think is now become something incredible to me. You know, and like. I look forward to that. I look forward to hiking in as far as my body will allow me, or as far as I need to, I guess. I look forward to sitting on a hill behind a pair of binoculars or a spotting scope, just watching these animals just do their thing, you know, without my influence on them whatsoever. I look forward to making that decision inside of myself, like, well, there it is, you know, that's the one. I'm going to spend the next part of this day or the next few days following it, trying to get as close as I can to it. Even the shot, like, I look forward to it. I look forward to the misery of dressing, all of it. You know, every part of it, I've already, like, I love it.
I'm into
already.
it, yeah.
You know?
Shane Mahoney was talking to me a couple weeks back, and I keep referencing him because I really value the things that he's shared, and he's really shaped some of my thoughts. And he said recently, he was talking, it's one of his podcasts as well, but he did a lecture at this Sitka event we were at recently, and he said that hunter recruitment had been down for years. There's just a lot of hunters that just, their kids weren't hunting anymore. And the reasons for why they did it were just kind of like, hey man, my grandpa did it, my grandpa before him. You do it because it's part of life. It's just what we do. And he's like, now there's this huge influx of hunters. Like, for a while, the hunter recruitment just hasn't been working. And now all of a sudden there's this new age hunter that are just coming into hunting like crazy. And there are these people that live in cities, kind of spend a lot of time there. They like to backpack or get outdoors. They are traditionally against hunting. And now they're caring about where their food comes from. They're caring about their impact to the environment. They're caring about getting back to, you know, their natural roots and their way of life, like primal things. And they're starting to look at hunting and go, this is a great way for me to feed my family and be part of nature. And they're just this whole group of people coming in, and they don't look like you guys. They might have tattoos, or they have they wear flat brim hats, and they work out at the gym all the time, and you're this country guy that's always grown up, you know, in this environment. And he's like, you have these two worlds coming together, and it's really neat. And when I see you guys, I see you coming from that other world.
Definitely.
You're not here because your parents did it or your grandparents did it. You're not here for these other reasons that so many other hunters are here for. You're here for that reason, that group that Shane is talking about. And I feel like he's like, for the first time, I have hope for things related to conservation and for hunting, because there's this whole influx of educated, intellectual, city-dwelling individuals who also see the need to hunt. And it's not some anachronism from the past, some outdated function. It's actually a viable modern-day activity.
Yeah.
And it's a way for human beings and animals to coexist in a more healthy way. It's pretty cool to hear it and then to see it.
It's cool. I mean, thank God for technology and, like, podcasts, because, like, I would say Michael got into it first, obviously, because, like I said, he's kind of the driving force for me that kind of pushed me over into thinking a different way. But podcasts, you know, like listening to you and Aaron and Stephen Ranella, like, it's extremely beneficial for us, and you guys just do it the right way, in my opinion. So it's just been great. It's been great to see the other side of hunting, and it's all through, like, reading and listening to podcasts. And so it's awesome. Like, it's awesome to be able to see that other side of it so easily, you know? And I think that's honestly a big reason why we had this shift.
When you talk about maybe people that have been born into it, it's generations deep, seeing people coming from another world into theirs, and there's a lot of pushback for kind of protecting what they have always had, which is it's that crap is silly to me, because I could care less about what the hell anybody thinks about me wanting to hunt,
Yeah.
like coming from the city or any of that, because I've got my reasons for it, and I could care less if I met anybody that's.
But it's cool, though. It's cool that people can appreciate why you're doing it.
Well, no, yeah, I'm just talking about any kind of pushback. It's like, and actually, I guess both sides of it. Like, I don't need any validation for it, because
Right.
I've got it inside myself. Like, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and this is what I've decided to do. And if the people surrounding me don't like it, then I'll find other people or do it myself.
But a lot of people don't have that, like, inner compass where they're
Right.
where they can say, I'm going to do it because I just have decided and it makes sense to me. And I'm not influenced by, peer pressure or some other outside deal. I've heard the case for it and both sides, and now I've made an assessment. A lot of people do worry about what other people think. And it is something that is common, I think. And
Definitely.
but I hear what you're saying. Like, it doesn't matter for you. And for me, often that's how I do the podcast too. It doesn't matter for me whether this is a type of content or something that other people are going to like or not like. I want to do shows that I want to do, and people can like it or not. But I think a lot of people don't do that. They're motivated by what the metrics tell them or what people say they want to hear, instead of doing something that's more in tune with themselves. Yeah.
Well, something that I have enjoyed about this shift is, in the last, maybe it's been forever, really, but whenever I kind of have an idea, I get maybe a little over obsessive about it. Like, I want to know what I'm doing, what I'm getting into, what I'm purchasing. So I invest like a godly amount of hours and time, and I just want to know.
Yeah.
Right? And since I've always enjoyed being in the backcountry, this new obsession that's been fully consuming has given me a greater knowledge of just even what I'm doing in something that I already appreciate. And the gear, like you talk about, like having like Kafaru gear or whatever, I would have appreciated coming upon that stuff before, and had it, even if I wasn't going to shoot an elk, like,
right.
Just the backpacks are awesome.
Yeah. And just like, it's.
So I got a question for you guys, because we kind of touched on this a little bit before. And again, Shane Mahoney talks about the last 20 years or 30 years of hunting content. That stuff that you guys, we talked about this, it didn't really resonate with you, most of that stuff, the hunting TV shows. In fact, it reinforced your opinion to not like hunting.
Oh yeah.
And Shane talked about that. Like, a lot of our shows seem to be a highlight reel of kill shots, which misses the point altogether on why we're actually doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
For me, a show that has been that I've been super excited about and greatly appreciated, and I hadn't been watching hunting TV for a long time, just simply because, although there was maybe a couple of programs on there I could relate to or like, most of them just I couldn't.
It's the most Mickey Mouse, like, fake, shallow shit.
I don't know that I'll ever be interested in. I mean, maybe for like educational purposes, like seeing how, if it showed more of that, like showed more of like the struggle, like the real struggle that people went
that's
through,
where you're kinda
and missing it,
Yeah, like Meat Eater.
Yeah.
When I started watching Meat Eater, I was like, whoa, this is different.
Yeah.
This is a show where the guy shoots a spike buck.
Yep.
And then talks about how they're going to eat it for Thanksgiving.
Or doesn't shoot anything.
Or doesn't shoot anything.
I loved Meat Eater. I thought that was awesome, and I was like pretty interested in it. But again, like, I just don't have any interest in watching a bunch of animals getting shot and people like high-fiving. Like, it's just
right. And I think that's what I wanted to ask you guys was what content. What things out there today changed your mind, and or made you see it in a different light? Because I think a lot of hunters have bemoaned what they see on TV for a long time.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. I mean, just the accessibility of free, unobjective, uncensored knowledge.
Yeah.
The availability to that stuff is incredible now.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was saying earlier with like being able to just so easily see like podcasts and
no longer being spoon-fed what
a network
what they want you to see.
You can jump online, whether it's podcasts or just articles that somebody's written, anything. You can pick and choose what you feel has value and content in it, or something that you're interested in. Just a click of a button, and that was it. I mean, podcasts was it for me. I spent hours a day for a couple of years just listening to podcasts because it was the most accessible and most entertaining form of
yeah.
But
I think Meat Eater is the first thing that I've seen that's not a podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, I like that, But I was talking to Candy about it yesterday, and she said that one company wouldn't use their footage because they didn't have the head wrapped and there was blood on the skull still. And for me, honestly, to be honest, it would upset me. Like it's hard for me still to see because I'm just not quite there yet.
Right.
But again, I think even if I did see it, I want to be like, oh my gosh, I would appreciate it for it being real,
Yeah. Well, Ranella, they show cutting up the animal.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked when that was available to watch.
Right on TV.
Yep.
And they used to not do it, but I think because it's such a food-oriented production, and the reason for it is so much around just the practicality of what hunting truly is, that you don't find it offensive in the same way as if you shot something and beheaded it and been like, do you see how big this rack is? All of a sudden, the blood is offensive.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, look at this steak. The blood isn't offensive.
Yeah, and watching him like cut it up with extreme respect and just like the way he even like touches meat, you're like, wow, you like really freaking care. And that's pretty cool to see. I would much rather just see somebody being real and missing a shot and crying or getting pissed off or just whatever emotion it brings out in them. I'd much rather watch that than a bunch of animals like dropping.
I really love the cinematic aspects of some shows. Like I've always liked Heartland Bowhunter. I think those guys do. I'm always been into bow hunting.
Yeah,
and it's a lot of whitetail kind of stuff as they're on that side of the states, and they do some occasional stuff on the other side. But there's certain shows where I really valued the beauty they brought to the screen, and then the respect that they showed for the animals, as they harvest them. They're still out there trying to kill like an older buck, but they're also out there shooting does. And I just there's certain shows I really like, but they were fewer and farther between, it seemed, for a long time. And I think it's neat right now because I see a shift in the messaging in the hunting world.
Yeah.
And there are hunters who don't like it.
Well, I think it's important for people who are not hunters. I think that maybe that stuff is more geared towards people who are maybe thinking about entering that world or the next chapter of their life and starting to hunt. But I think it's great for people who have an open mind about it. I think it's extremely beneficial for people like us, and maybe for like avid hunters, it's just,
well,
they want to see the kill shot. They want to see this big giant animal because they're just so used to it. But I want to see the struggle.
I think Shane on his lecture said we should change our messaging. He's like, we have built a lot of content that satisfies the hunter, the hardcore hunter. We keep talking to ourselves. We keep making shows for ourselves. And he's like, why aren't we making shows for the non-hunter?
Yep.
Why aren't we making shows for the greater community? Like Donnie Vincent does an excellent job of making shows that resonate with the entire population in America, or Meat Eater. It transcends a hunting show. It's a every person show.
Yeah.
And so creating content and messaging and sharing stuff that is geared toward everyone, I think does more for the future of conservation, the future of hunting than does a show that's like targeted toward a hunter.
Yep.
And I think it's harder though, because there's a lot of peer pressure to produce something. Like I'm working on a film now, and it's like I feel like I'm going on for like 15 minutes from a Wikipedia page, like on the history of black bear in Alaska, and then conservation issues and talking about things that most hunting TV shows don't address. But then I'm thinking about it from the shoes of someone who's never hunted before, like someone like you.
Right.
If you watch this, what are you going to walk away thinking? Versus, I know kind of what a lot of my hunting buddies will think. They'll be like, dude, I just wanted to get to the spot where you shot the bear. Like, this other stuff, yeah, I already know, or it's not really something I'm too worried about.
See, I love
but someone
that.
like you, it really does matter to you. And
it means more to me. All of that means more to me than actually seeing the animal go down. You could leave that part out, and I would think it was a great film. Know.
Well, I think there's a subset of the hunting community, a much larger part of that community that feels that way than originally than I thought, and you can see it in how they're choosing what they're choosing to watch and what they're choosing to consume as content that resonates with them. So I think it's pretty cool. I think it's cool you guys came. I had a blast hanging out with you guys. Super glad to meet you. I think I'd love to hear more about your journey down the road. Your hunting trips, what you think about it after you've experienced some of that, and then kind of how things go in terms of your friends and your peers and your family members right now that follow along and see it and how they feel about it. Because they, I know for me, there are people that I worked with in downtown Portland for like 8 or 9 years, and we grew to be very good friends, and that relationship that we shared built a trust between us. And so they're like, if Brian goes out and does something, I know he's not this mean dude, so there must be more to it than that. And I was able to kind of share my ideas on why I hunt with someone and open their eyes up to other ideas around it than their preconceived notions. And so one thing I've said many times is I love individuals who have influence that's completely outside of the traditional hunting community. Mm-hmm. Like Joe Rogan, because Joe has this LA, California, New York kind of audience that doesn't hunt, but he goes out and does it and brings some awareness to that world. It's a lot more powerful than what I can do with my influence, because most of my people in my circle already
are hunters.
Are already hunters. They're already on the same page as me. And so it's cool to have someone like people like you coming on board, and you're going to have an influence on individuals around this that is different than a lot of people came to camp this weekend. Yeah. And I think it's really neat. So thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's been awesome.
Any closing thing you want to say?
Not me. I'm not good when I'm put on the spot.
No, this has just been, it's like you just said, it was a good weekend.
It really was.
I could have really been fine if I didn't come, but I'm glad that I did.
Yeah.
Just just watching people do their thing, watching her get involved with something, having conversation with you. It's all been good.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Me too.
Awesome, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Stay gritty and stay in touch.
We
Well,
will.